This program is brought to you by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce this year's Advanced Degrees Commencement speaker, Vartan Gregorian, the 12th president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, former president of Brown University, and a distinguished Stanford alumnus. From the earliest days of its founding, Stanford University has sought to educate its students so that they might promote the public good. Today's speaker has exemplified that. Recognized as one of higher education's most passionate advocates, Vartan Gregorian is a man of many accomplishments. As a young boy in Tabriz, Iran, in economically challenged circumstances, he discovered a love of books and learning and the wisdom of his grandmother. The French vice consul in Tabriz encouraged him to go to Beirut to advance his education. His father agreed to let him go if he could get a passport on his own, figuring, as most fathers would, that task was beyond the skills of his 14-year-old son. But Vartan Gregorian was an enterprising and determined young man who had already begun to acquire more than a few supporters. He was soon on his way. When he decided to come to the United States to continue his undergraduate studies, he applied to Stanford and to the University of California at Berkeley. He was accepted at both. Fortunately for us, our letter of acceptance arrived ahead of Berkeley's. Now, I understand that we sent our letter by airmail. Berkeley chose the more cost-effective, but ultimately costly, surface mail. By the time the Cal letter had arrived, he had decided to come to Palo Alto. In an interview a few years ago, he described his initial impression of Stanford as one of the most enchanting experiences and the scariest as well. I was just blown away, he said. I was astonished to find that students were able to question professors. He goes on, I never, ever imagined that in the middle of a lecture, I would raise my hand and say, "Excuse me, what do you mean by that?" Well, it may have been a new experience to him initially, but as he relates in his enchanting memoir, The Road to Home, he adapted quickly, and his love for learning continued to grow. In talking about his Stanford years in his memoir, he says, Stanford became my gateway to the USA, my gateway to knowledge, to individualism, and to citizenship. Stanford adopted me. The International Center became my home, and a cohort of professionals and community volunteers, my extended family. And I married a Stanford graduate. Smart move. After completing his undergraduate studies in only 2 years, Vartan stayed on to pursue a PhD. It was during his graduate years that he met an undergraduate student, Claire Russell. They started dating, frequenting such popular Stanford hangouts as the O and Rosati's. Claire graduated with her bachelor's in 1959, and she and Vartan married in 1960. We are delighted that Claire Gregorian was also able to join us here today. Vartan continued his studies and received his PhD in History and Humanities from Stanford in 1964. Although he planned to return to Beirut, he was offered a position at San Francisco State College, teaching European and Middle Eastern history. He has since taught at UCLA, the University of Texas at Austin, the University of Pennsylvania, where he was Dean of Faculty in Arts and Sciences before becoming Penn's 23rd Provost. In 1981, Vartan was named president of the New York Public Library. At that time, the library was seriously underfunded and in desperate need of renovation and maintenance. During his tenure as president, he transformed the library into a showplace, persuading donors to invest in its rehabilitation. More than a few New Yorkers, this one included, consider the revitalization of the New York Public Library and the restoration of the glorious main branch on Fifth Avenue to be one of the city's and one of Vartan's great civic achievements. In 1989, Vartan returned to the Academy as the 16th president of Brown University, a position he held until 1997. When he left Brown, the university honored him with a fellowship, a professorship, and a quadrangle, all named in his honor. And the faculty awarded him the Susan Culver Rosenberger Medal, the highest honor bestowed by the Brown faculty. After years of fundraising for various institutions, Vartan was named the 12th president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, where he now finds himself in the position of supporting other visionaries. In explaining these new challenges, he said, "People think that giving away money is an easy job. Actually, it's harder than raising money. The issue is, are we going to be an incubator or an oxygen tank? Foundations have to be in the idea business, not the need business. Everyone has needs. We have to prepare the next generation of leaders, scholars, and thinkers." Over the years, his efforts have been recognized with numerous honorary degrees, fellowships, and awards, including the National Humanities Medal and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, this nation's highest civilian honor. In his memoir, he reflects on how far he has come, and I quote, "From Tabriz, Iran, to New York City, by way of Lebanon, California, Texas, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and a number of other places in between, a poor boy yearning for knowledge, who I hope became an educated man, now at the helm of an organization dedicated to disseminating knowledge to all the world." End of quote. Throughout his life, Vartan Gregorian has demonstrated a zeal for learning and a deep commitment to the public good. We are very privileged to have him here today. Please join me in warmly welcoming one of Stanford's own, Vartan Gregorian.
Thank you very much. When the announcement was made that I will be speaking here, one of the students said I did not seem to have enough rock star power. So I brought some dark glasses. Maybe it will help me. President Hennessy, members of the Board of Trustees, Provost Etchemendy, deans, distinguished faculty, happy graduates, proud parents, and relatives, ladies and gentlemen. I've given many commencement addresses and received numerous honorary degrees from assorted universities and colleges, but being here today at my beloved alma mater and to speak to you is a very special occasion for me, and indeed an honor. Commencements are special, symbolic, solemn, and joyous occasions, marking the end of one phase of life and the beginning of another. As I look out today at you, I am delighted that there are so many people here to celebrate this wonderful day with you. In 1958, when I graduated from Stanford, I had no family in this country. Indeed, I had no one to attend my graduation ceremony, so I did not march. In 1964, when I got my PhD, I was teaching, which meant I had no opportunity to attend that ceremony either. So today, it's with envy, great admiration, and enthusiasm that I'm participating in your commencement. In pondering what to say, I decided to tell you a little about my life, not knowing that President Hesse will tell some of it to you. I hope some of the points I'll make would be relevant to your lives. In 1959, when I was a graduate student at Stanford, the author William Bradford Huey wrote a novel that was later made into a wonderful movie starring Julie Andrews and James Garner. You may not know this movie, but your parents will probably remember. It's called The Americanization of Emily, and was about a woman in Britain whose life and outlook are dramatically changed by dealings with Americans. Well, I may not look the part, and I certainly am not British, but I was the male embodiment of Emily here at Stanford. It was here that my Americanization began. I arrived from, as it was said before, from Tabriz, Iran, via Beirut, Lebanon, where I went to high school. I came here alone, without a clue about America or its higher education, and certainly had no clue at all about Stanford. But Stanford, as it was mentioned, adopted me. My higher education took place here at Stanford. Here I met some of America's great scholars. California became my window to America as well as the foundation of my academic career. After all, my first two teaching positions were here in California. I met many wonderful friends, but most importantly, I met and married my wife, Claire Russell, class of '59, here at Stanford. One thing I'm always grateful to Stanford for was that it did not try to make me abandon my past, but encouraged me to embrace it, to validate it, and let my past help guide my future. My Stanford education allowed me to begin to understand the relationship of the unique and the individual self to the social, political, and cultural world around us. And Stanford also gave me the courage to think those big, imponderable thoughts that are our companions throughout our lives, such as, what is our relationship to universal order? What is our place as a human being among the great sea of mankind? Though I have never completely answered these and other questions for myself, and perhaps they will always be unanswerable, they have helped me to create a framework for the way I have lived my life. In retrospect, my Americanization at Stanford was, as it was mentioned, successful, because if somebody had suggested to me in 1956, when I arrived here as a freshman with a rudimentary grasp of English and complete ignorance of American society, its culture, and its history, that one day I would not only graduate from Stanford, but also earn a PhD degree and then become a professor at some 7 public and private universities, I would have said that such prediction was in the realm of fantasy or lunacy. And yet, that is what happened. And that's not all that happened. I also became only the second foreign-born chief academic officer of the University of Pennsylvania, the first being William Smith, who was brought to Philadelphia by Benjamin Franklin. I became the first foreign-born president of New York Public Library, and then the second foreign-born president of an Ivy League university, and finally, the second foreign-born president of Carnegie Corporation of New York. The first one was none other than Andrew Carnegie, a Scotsman. I know it's a cliche to say only in America, but in my case, that is the truth. In these difficult times, when many of us worry about our country and its direction, about its values, its promise, and its future, I'm still convinced that while America is not perfect, it is still perfectible. It is still a land of opportunity for immigrants and for international students, not only Americans alone, such as myself. Many of you in the audience today are proof of that as well. It's amazing, isn't it, that until recently, 2/3 of all students studying abroad have been attending American colleges and universities. But with the this opportunity we have all had to study in America's great institutions of higher learning, comes also responsibility too. What we have learned in school, we must find ways to put into action. We cannot retreat from the big issues of society and the world and our time into a pygmy world of private piety, nor can we become cynics paralyzed by our own disdain. And we cannot afford to become social, political, and moral isolationists. That is especially true for those of us who are former or current international students. Whether we remain here or to return to our native countries, we have the obligation to build bridges between our nations, our societies, and the United States, especially now, and vice versa. And those who come from developing countries have yet another obligation, a heavy one, to work towards creating a better quality of life for those at home and to advance the opportunities that are available to them. After all, you represent their hopes for a better future. For those of us who were born elsewhere but were educated here and then became American citizens, we have reason to be doubly grateful. One, because we received our education in America, not to mention financial support. And two, because America granted us the privilege of citizenship in a country whose Constitution proclaims that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them these are liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. America, these are lofty aspirations. America, remember, however, has always been and will always be a work in progress. Every generation has and must contribute to that ongoing progress. As John Gardner once said it, it is important to be both a loving critic, but also a critical lover. America needs all of us to be both. And now let me come back to you. Stanford marks the beginning of your latest wonderful, arduous journey. It has provided you with means to be on your way. It has given you not only an education, a profession, and all the skills and competencies you need to do well in the world, but it's also given you choices and the ability to choose. Sometimes you may find you have so many choices that all the possibilities available to you will be overwhelming. This morning, I'd like to share with you 3 lessons I have learned that may, I stress, may assist you sort of throughout all your choices. The first lesson actually is a well-known one. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Sir William Osler, professor of medicine at Oxford University in the early years of the 20th century, who said that young men and women should be careful in the selection of their ambitions because they're likely to realize them. Since you have the education, the knowledge, and the training to realize your ambitions, be sure as you can that your ambition also reflect what you really love to do. I'm reminded of some lines from the Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, and I quote, "What is to work with love? Is to weave the cloth with the threads drawn from your heart." I know all of you have good hearts, bright with many colors of strong thread. And I know you will be able to use the threads of your heart and your soul to weave many wonderful tapestries. Speaking of your ambition, sometimes you may be masters of it, but watch out. Other times you may be its slave, and watch out. Other times you may be victim of hubris. No matter what, try to bear in mind the next lesson. Don't confuse a job with a career. In the past, I used to say to students that in your life, you will have many jobs but only one career. Now, however, if we keep on the way we are going in terms of how long we can expect to live, many of you will be octogenarians. Some of you may be even centenarians. So you may have not only many jobs, but also many careers as well. I haven't quite reached either age category yet, but I have worked in a number of different fields, as it was mentioned, academia, libraries, and now philanthropy. And I can share with you the fact that people often ask me, which job did you like best? But they're asking me the wrong question. I have never considered any of the positions I've held as jobs. In fact, I even think of them as more than careers. To me, they have been missions in which teaching and learning are primary ingredients, with me as the primary student. So even though this is probably the last thing you want to hear today, I want to remind you that whether you like it or not, in order to survive and thrive, you will have to be lifelong students, lifetime learners. And yes, there are and always will be difficult times. when you will think you have come to a dead end in your life or in your career. But let me tell you, as one who has experienced once or twice those events, when that happens, think of what the author Gabriel Garcia Marquez once said when he spoke of the conviction that human beings are not born once and for all on the day their mothers give birth to them, but that life obliges them to give birth to themselves over and over again. Time, experience, knowledge, education, love, one's values, all these can and do affect us and change us and enable us to reinvent ourselves. I have reinvented myself many times, and I'm sure you will do the same thing. For me, Marquez's words have a particular resonance because they reinforce values that were taught to me by maternal grandmother, about whom your president mentioned. She raised me. My grandmother was an illiterate peasant, a poor one at that. I don't believe that she knew where Greece was, nor Rome, nor Stanford. She certainly did not know who Plutarch was. But even so, she taught me the same lessons as Plutarch highlighted in his lives almost 2,000 years ago, when he said, essentially, that character makes the men and women. My grandmother was my first teacher. She instructed me in the moral lessons of life and the right way. Through her sheer character, stoic tenacity, formidable dignity, self-reliant individuality, and utter integrity. She was for me the best example of what good character means. In spite of many adversities and tragedies, wartime ravages, poverty, deprivation, and the deaths of her 7 children, she never became cynic, never abandoned her values, and never compromised her dignity. Indeed, it was from my grandmother that I learned that dignity is not negotiable. Your reputation is not for sale and must not be mortgaged as a down payment on your ambitions. It was my grandmother's living example that shaped the very foundations of my character. Between what I have learned from Plutarch and my grandmother, I would dare a combination of forces I would dare anybody to challenge. I feel confident in telling you that in the coming years, you will meet people who are more powerful than you, richer than you, smarter than you, even handsomer and more beautiful than you. But what will be your distinguished mark will always be your character. And what will define your character, your conduct, your ability to live by principles you believe in, even if that means fighting tenaciously for what is right or what you know to be wrong. Nobody goes through life without encountering obstacles, disappointments, illnesses, and problems. Nobody can keep from making mistakes or taking a wrong turn. Nobody can escape illness or avoid the specter of failure. Let me point out that coping with success is easy. How you deal with adversity, with failure, with setbacks will reveal your true character. How nimble you are about getting back on your feet after some large or small disaster, defeat, setback, will help you to determine just how far those feet of yours will take you in the world. But that's where your upbringing, the texture of your education, your values will help you to develop a distinctive attitude towards life, an attitude that persistently seeks meaning and perspective, an attitude that exudes adaptability and resilience in a relentlessly changing and perplexing world, an attitude of moral courage and steadfastness in the face of overwhelming human need and suffering. How to develop and maintain such attitudes in an age where individualism has become a cult and celebrities, icons, where people are famous for being famous, is not an easy task. We must be reminded time and time again that we are not mere consumer, entertainment, socioeconomic, sociobiological information units to be processed. We are not numbers. We are unique, rational, spiritual, and social beings, full of competing sentiments, insatiable yearnings, dreams, imagination, quests, and ties that bind us to the past and the future. It might be helpful to remind ourselves that it was Alexis de Tocqueville who in 1830s coined the term individualism to describe the self-reliant character of Americans. But he also went on to extol Americans' generosity, their proclivity to create voluntary citizens association, to help themselves and others, and the fact that voluntarism and altruism have played a critical role in preserving and strengthening what he called the modern world's first nation that did not have a ruling class. In that way, he made clear that both the private and public realms, private good and public good, are interdependent. One without the other will diminish the bonds of community and creativity. Some 125 years later, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put it more succinctly. We may have all come in different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Today, we must be reminded also that what is unique about each of us should be celebrated and cherished, that we must not forget that we also belong to a larger community, society, and indeed humanity. As Americans and as human beings, we have an obligation to contribute to the well-being of our communities, hence to the public good. I hope as you climb the ladder of success, you'll always remember the dictum, from those to whom much is given, much is expected. In conclusion, I would like to offer you just one last thought about our shared human condition. Today, information floods over us, and a millisecond later, it comes another flood of data and information, and then another and another. Images of pleasure and pain, fear and joy, love and hate assault us from every angle. The world around us is full of raucous chatter and noise. It's a wonder that amid all this cacophony, it's hard to see ourselves as part of a larger whole, a continuing eternal harmony, that ancient music of the spheres that the ancients thought we would hear only in our inner ear. Well, today I would like to remind you of your connection to history. Try to listen with your inner ear to those who went before you, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and on, who all wanted to be good ancestors to you. As an historian, educator, and a fellow student, I feel bound to remind you that the time has come for you to return the favor. You have to learn to be good ancestors to the future. Today's commencement marks the beginnings of many other beginnings for you, many other commencements in your life. Many mornings, many beginnings are before you. The future is waiting for you with open arms. I wish you good luck, great success, and great humanity. Thank you very much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu.